According to reports, the FBI is looking into allegations made by the former Duke of York, which means more negative news for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. We learned this morning that they will not be attending the Easter church service. According to reports, Prince Andrew's tenure as a trade envoy has ended, and he is now getting specialized assistance as he gets used to his new living situation. This development coincides with continued scrutiny and the potential for increased enquiries in the UK and beyond. Following the much-discussed controversy surrounding him, a striking image has emerged. Andrew was allegedly spotted on the grounds of a small farmhouse rather than in a stately royal residence. A plain white static trailer stood nearby, supported on bricks and partially concealed by trees. The scene seemed to signify much more than a brief visit or a need for seclusion. Rather, it depicted a stark change from a once prominent royal lifestyle to a much more modest one. What makes this particular moment strong is that it goes beyond a straightforward move or the peculiarity of a caravan on royal territory. It depicts a highly visible decline in prominence that is no longer protected by royal walls. The public has taken notice of this element due to its symbolic meaning. It's not just about Andrew's current residence, it's also about the setting's significance in relation to his evolving status. Greetings from British Affairs Today, a thorough analysis of royal developments is conducted. Keep in touch for continued updates, significant discoveries, and in-depth analyses of the most recent tailies influencing the monarchy. In many respects, the humble caravan tells more about power, dominance, and the strategic choices made by the palace than it does about Andrew. The narrative goes deeper though. Royal Lodge, a vast estate connected to royal history and formally connected to the Queen Mother, carried prestige and legacy and served as a symbol of his status for many years. Even in contentious times, staying there conveyed a feeling of lasting importance and status. I'm curious about the advice that the royal family, the king, and his advisors have received. It appears to me that they are attempting to put some distance between these two and the royal family as a whole. As you correctly point out, both Andrew Loney and I have stated that there is enough proof to examine some of their interactions over the years. For a while, there was a persistent perception that Andrew maintained some degree of significance despite the controversies around him inside the royal hierarchy. However, that impression could not last forever. The various pillars of his regal life started to erode gradually but progressively. His public persona has all but vanished in recent years. His former stature gradually disappeared from view, appearances became rare and focus went elsewhere. Now what's left is a far more distinct reality. His formal positions were gradually eliminated, and his reputation, which was already severely tarnished by the aftermath from his affiliation with Jeffrey Epstein, which he has always denied, caused him to become more and more alone. This was the outcome of a deliberate and slow process rather than a single dramatic moment. His visibility, position, and responsibilities gradually diminished until very little remained. He eventually faced increasing pressure to leave Royal Lodge as a result of this. There was more to the relocation than simply moving. It was a calculated move. Moving him to Marsh Farm seemed to be intended to remove him, reduce his public profile, and include a scenario that had previously occurred in a highly visible manner. The actual shift took some time. Prince Philip chose to spend his retirement at Wood Farm, a site with its own royal significance, during an interim stay. This comparison highlights how similar locales can be viewed differently based on the circumstances surrounding them, adding another level of complexity to the narrative. They might be able to toss objects at him there, you know. Could. Will Andrew go to jails? Is it possible that the guy who was once Queen Elizabeth's favourite son, the brother of the king, ends up behind bars? He ought to be imprisoned if he has committed any crimes. Prince Philip made the decision to live out his last years at Wood Farm on his own terms, withdrawing from public life with quiet dignity and seclusion. Andrew's situation, however, could not feel more different. Even while the estate is the same, its significance has entirely changed. One retreated voluntarily while the other seems far more like a situation-driven migration. At this point, the plot takes an unexpected turn when the caravan, a small two-bedroom apartment on Marsh Farm's grounds, is introduced. According to early sources, it was meant for security personnel because Marsh Farm doesn't have the same infrastructure as Royal Lodge. The smooth integration of staff activities at Royal Lodge made it possible for everything to operate covertly within the estate. However, Marsh Farm does not provide that degree of capability. Consequently, a makeshift building that was built on bricks and looked more haphazard than intended had to be brought in. That kind of picture is noteworthy for an organization that is based on tradition, stability, and flawless presentation. It raises more general concerns about status and position by upsetting the perception of continuity and making the change in circumstances impossible to ignore. Further complicating the narrative, rumors started to circulate that Andrew has spent time in the caravan and used it on occasion. Although that interpretation is still up for debate, some have seen this as an indication that he is adapting and possibly adopting a more humble lifestyle. And if that information demonstrates that others in the palace were aware of this and had helped Andrew for many years, whether or not those allegations are totally true, the story easily fits into a specific image that implies Andrew has moved away from his previous position and is adapting to a more subdued, everyday existence. However, it is not how everyone views it. For some, it seems more like a deliberately constructed public persona than a smooth shift. Critics contend that it may be a type of managed messaging, an effort to control perception and contain the situation, rather than representing true change. That raises an important question. Presenting this version of events is truly beneficial to whom? Another detail hasn't gotten as much attention. Marsh Farm hasn't been depicted as a tranquil rural getaway. According to reports, the property's security has increased overall, reinforced fencing has been added, and monitoring systems have been improved. When taken as a whole, these components point to something far more planned and regulated than a straightforward transition to a more sedate lifestyle. It is noteworthy that Peter Mandelson and Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor have both denied any misconduct. And the former royal is scheduled to relocate in a few days. From Sandringham, one of the King's royal homes, to Arley, another private home. The extent of the property's protection points to something far more than a straightforward, peaceful way of living. Rather, it indicates a highly regulated and controlled atmosphere. Upon closer inspection, the story starts to change. On the surface, what might seem private appears to be organized, watched after, and purposefully controlled. Specifics such as strengthened fencing. It is more difficult to see this as a true fresh start because of surveillance systems and defined staff areas. The arrangement tends to highlight limitations and distance rather than flexibility. At this point, it is hard to disregard the larger background. These advancements are not isolated from one another. All of them have a connection to King Charles III. He has publicly stated his views for a while now. The working royal fold no longer includes Andrew. Although the world can clearly see that line, the truth behind palace doors seem much more